The mentally strong are not born different. They simply stop obeying the impulses that control everyone else. They feel fear, anger, rejection, pressure, and uncertainty like anyone else. But they do not let every feeling become a reaction. They do not let every insult steal their peace. They do not let every setback decide their identity. That is where the difference begins. Not in arrogance, not in superiority, not in pretending to be emotionless, just training. The ability to pause when others react, stay steady when others panic, and return to what is in their control when life becomes difficult. Stoicism gives a simple standard for this kind of strength. Control your judgment, discipline your actions, protect your mind, and build a character that does not collapse under pressure. These 10 principles are not about being better than everyone else. They are about becoming harder to control, harder to provoke, and harder to pull away from yourself. And the first principle begins there. Principle 1. They control their judgment before they try to control life. Most people try to control the situation before they control the meaning they give to it. Someone criticizes you, and the first impulse is to fix how they see you. A plan fails, and the mind immediately tries to force the outcome back into place. Someone disrespects you, and the body prepares for a fight before wisdom has time to enter. But mental strength begins before the reaction. It begins in the private moment where life has touched you, but your judgment has not yet been chosen. That is the place most people miss. The event happens once, but the meaning can keep hurting you for hours. A rejection becomes heavier when the mind turns it into proof that you are not enough. A delay becomes suffering when it becomes a story that life is against you. An insult becomes control when you believe you must react immediately to protect your dignity. The outside world may create pressure, but the interpretation decides how deeply that pressure enters. This is one of the clearest Stoic lessons. You cannot control every event, but you can train the part of you that interprets events. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not only by what happens, but by the view they take of what happens. That does not mean pain is imaginary. It means pain becomes stronger when the mind turns it into identity, prophecy, or personal attack. The mentally strong do not deny reality. If something is unfair, they see it. If someone behaves badly, they do not pretend it is acceptable. If a mistake has consequences, they accept the lesson. But they do not add meanings that weaken them. They do not turn one bad moment into a verdict on their whole life. They do not give one person's opinion the authority to become their truth. Their first discipline is the pause. Before reacting, they slow down the sentence forming inside the mind. Sometimes the situation is not truly dangerous. Pride is simply wounded. Sometimes criticism contains useful correction, but the mind turns it into shame. Sometimes failure is not final. Discomfort only makes it feel final. The pause gives you enough space to separate what happened from what your fear is adding. The practical question is simple. What am I making this mean? That one question can save your peace. It does not remove the problem, but it stops the problem from becoming your identity. It helps you respond from judgment instead of impulse. It reminds you that the insult, the delay, the rejection, and the pressure are not fully yours to command, but the meaning you build around them can still be trained. And once your judgment becomes disciplined, life loses one of its easiest ways to control you. If this first principle gives you clarity, leave a like on this episode so it can reach someone else who's trying to become harder to provoke and harder to control. As we continue, the next principle goes deeper. Mentally strong people do not obey every impulse just because it feels urgent. Principle 2. They pause before emotion becomes action. Most people do not lose control because they feel too much. They lose control because they obey the feeling too quickly. Anger rises, and the mouth starts speaking. Fear appears, and the body starts retreating. Pride gets touched, and suddenly the conversation becomes a fight. The feeling may be real, but real does not always mean wise. An emotion can tell you that something matters, but it cannot always tell you what to do next. The mentally strong understand this difference. They do not shame themselves for feeling anger, fear, pressure, jealousy, or disappointment. They know emotion is part of being human. But they also know that the first emotional impulse is often raw information, not final instruction. Anger may point to a boundary, but it may also exaggerate the insult. Fear may point to risk, but it may also protect comfort. Pride may demand defense, but it may only be trying to avoid embarrassment. This is why the pause matters. A pause is not weakness. It is the moment where you stop emotion from becoming behavior before judgment has had time to speak. 1 breath before answering, 1 minute before sending the message, 1 walk before making the decision, 1 night before reacting to something that wounded your ego. These small delays can protect you from hours of regret. Stoicism is often misunderstood as emotional suppression, but that is too simple. The goal is not to become numb. The goal is to stop being dragged around by every inner movement. Epictetus spoke about examining impressions before accepting them. In daily life, that means the feeling appears, but you do not immediately sign your name under it. You let it be present, then you decide whether it deserves action. Most people treat urgency as truth. If the anger feels intense, they assume the response must be immediate. If fear feels strong, they assume retreat must be wise. If guilt feels heavy, they assume they must surrender their boundary. The mentally strong are different because they have trained themselves to distrust urgency when it tries to bypass reason. The practical move is simple: create a gap before action. When emotion rises, slow the body first, lower the voice, relax the hands, step away from the screen, delay the reply. Give the mind enough time to separate the feeling from the command. This does not remove the emotion, but it stops the emotion from owning the next move. You are allowed to feel deeply without reacting blindly. You are allowed to be angry without becoming cruel. You are allowed to be afraid without abandoning what matters. You are allowed to feel pressure without turning it into panic. That is where strength becomes visible, not in the absence of emotion, but in the space between emotion and action. And the more you practice that space, the less life can control you through the first feeling it triggers. Principle 3. They do not treat discomfort as a sign to quit. Most people quit too early because they misunderstand discomfort. The moment something becomes boring, heavy, uncertain, or emotionally uncomfortable, the mind starts looking for an exit. It says the path is wrong. It says the timing is bad. It says you are not ready. Sometimes that may be true, but often discomfort is not a warning that you should stop. It is simply the feeling that appears when growth begins asking for payment. The mentally strong know this. They do not treat every hard feeling as danger. They understand that boredom can train focus. Rejection can train emotional independence. Pressure can train patience. Silence can train self-trust. Difficulty can train character. The same experience that makes one person escape can make another person stronger, depending on how they meet it. This does not mean worshipping pain. Stoicism is not about damaging yourself to prove strength. Some discomfort is a signal to rest, adjust, or step away from something unhealthy. But a lot of people use discomfort as evidence that they should avoid the very thing that would build them. They want discipline without repetition, confidence without exposure, success without uncertainty, and peace without ever facing what disturbs them. That is not how strength is built. Strength grows when you stop asking life to feel easy before you do what is necessary. The task may feel boring, but it still deserves your attention. The conversation may feel uncomfortable, but honesty may still be required. The first attempt may feel awkward, but skill has to begin somewhere. The rejection may hurt, but it does not have to become a reason to disappear. The Stoics practiced this through endurance and voluntary hardship. They understood that a person who cannot tolerate discomfort becomes easy to control. Comfort becomes the master. Convenience becomes the standard. Fear becomes the advisor. But when you train yourself to stay steady inside manageable discomfort, you become less fragile. You stop needing every condition to be perfect before you act. The practical move is to separate harmful pain from useful discomfort. Harmful pain breaks your health, dignity, or values. Useful discomfort stretches your patience, discipline, courage, or skill. The first deserves attention and correction. The second often deserves your willingness to stay a little longer. You do not become mentally strong by escaping every moment that feels unpleasant. You become stronger by learning which discomfort is asking you to quit and which discomfort is asking you to grow. And once you stop treating discomfort as a command to escape, another weakness becomes clearer: how easily comfort and convenience can start ruling your life. Principle 4. They refuse to be ruled by pleasure and convenience. Most people do not lose their strength in one dramatic failure. They lose it slowly. Through comfort, they obey every day. One easy choice does not seem dangerous. Skipping the difficult task once. Reaching for distraction when silence feels uncomfortable. Choosing the pleasure that gives relief now but leaves regret later. Avoiding effort because the mood is not right. None of these moments looks serious on its own. But repeated long enough, convenience becomes a ruler. It begins making decisions before your values even get a chance to speak. The mentally strong are not against pleasure. They are not trying to live a dry, joyless life. They can enjoy rest, food, entertainment, comfort, and ease. The difference is that they do not let pleasure become the master. They know the danger is not comfort itself, but dependence on comfort. Once you need life to feel easy before you act, you become fragile. Once you need every task to feel pleasant before you begin, discipline disappears. This is the Stoic principle of temperance. Temperance is not punishment, it is self-command. It is the ability to enjoy what is good without becoming owned by it. A person without temperance is pulled around by appetite, mood, impulse, and convenience. A person with temperance can feel the pull and still choose what is better. You see this in the ordinary details of a day. The body wants more sleep, but responsibility asks you to rise. The mind wants distraction, but the work asks for focus. The ego wants the easy pleasure of complaining, but character asks for correction. The mood wants comfort, but the future asks for discipline. These moments are small, but they are where self-command is built or lost. Most people call comfort self-care, even when it is avoidance. Real self-care restores you so you can return stronger. Avoidance only delays the responsibility and makes the mind weaker the next time it appears. Rest is necessary. Recovery is necessary. But using comfort to escape every difficult feeling slowly teaches the mind that discomfort is unbearable. The mentally strong train themselves differently. They do not wait until they feel motivated to do what matters. They do not let the easiest option become the default. They practice small acts of refusal, not checking the phone immediately, not eating out of boredom, not speaking just to release irritation, not quitting the moment effort becomes inconvenient. These are not impressive victories, but they build a private kind of strength. A useful rule is simple: enjoy comfort, but do not take orders from it. When comfort becomes a servant, life has balance. When comfort becomes the master, strength begins to decay. The mentally strong understand this early. They protect their freedom by refusing to let pleasure, convenience, and easy escape become the quiet owners of their character. Principle 5. They turn obstacles into material for character. The mentally strong do not face fewer problems. They simply refuse to let every problem become an excuse. That is the difference. Most people meet an obstacle and immediately ask why it is happening to them. They complain about the timing, the unfairness, the difficulty, the people involved, the delay, the loss, the pressure. And sometimes they are right. Life can be unfair. People can disappoint you. Circumstances can become heavier than expected. But complaining for too long turns pain into identity. It makes the obstacle the center of the story. The mentally strong do not waste the obstacle. They use it. A rejection becomes training in emotional independence. A delay becomes training in patience. A failure becomes training in correction. A difficult person becomes training in self-command. A season of pressure becomes training in endurance. They do not pretend the obstacle feels good. They do not call every hardship a blessing while secretly breaking inside. They simply understand that if the difficulty is already here, then the only useful question is how it can be used without letting it corrupt the mind. This is one of the strongest Stoic ideas. The obstacle can become the way, not because the obstacle is pleasant, but because it gives character something to work against. Courage cannot exist without fear. Patience cannot exist without delay. Discipline cannot exist without temptation. Self-control cannot exist without impulse. The very thing that frustrates you may also be the thing that reveals where your training is still weak. Most people want strength without resistance. They want confidence without rejection, peace without provocation, discipline without discomfort, wisdom without mistakes. But character does not grow in perfect conditions. Perfect conditions usually reveal very little. It is pressure that shows you whether your principles are real or only ideas you admire when life is calm. This does not mean seeking unnecessary suffering. There is nothing noble about creating chaos just to prove you can survive it. But when difficulty arrives naturally, the mentally strong do not hand it full control over their inner state. They let it expose what needs training. If anger appears, they train restraint. If fear appears, they train courage. If disappointment appears, they train steadiness. If failure appears, they train adjustment. The practical move is to turn the obstacle into a specific practice, not a vague lesson, but a clear training ground. If someone provokes you, the practice is calm speech. If a plan fails, the practice is correction without self-pity. If you are ignored, the practice is not begging for attention. If you feel pressure, the practice is doing the next necessary thing without panic. An obstacle becomes destructive when it makes you smaller, bitter, or reactive. It becomes useful when it strengthens the part of you that can choose. And once you begin using difficulty this way, life does not have to be easy before it becomes meaningful. The next principle goes into one of the quietest sources of weakness, needing approval before you move. Principle 6. They do not need approval to move forward. If you need everyone to understand your path before you walk it, your path is still being controlled by other people. Approval feels good. Encouragement helps. Being supported by the right people can give you strength. But mental weakness begins when support becomes permission. You wait until someone believes in you before you believe your own direction. You delay because someone might judge. You soften your ambition because someone might laugh. You make your choices smaller so they fit inside other people's comfort. That is not humility. That is dependence dressed as caution. The mentally strong do not move through life asking the crowd to bless every step. They can listen. They can take advice. They can receive correction. But they do not treat every opinion as a command. They know that if their courage depends on applause, then silence will be enough to stop them. If their confidence depends on approval, then criticism will be enough to redirect them. This is where many people quietly surrender their lives. They do not say, "I am controlled by others." They say, "I just want people to understand." But beneath that sentence, there is often a hidden need. The need to feel safe before acting. And sometimes the people you are waiting on cannot give you that safety. Not because they are evil, but because they are limited by their own fears, beliefs, and expectations. Stoicism is sharp here. It reminds you that reputation, praise, and approval are not fully yours. You can influence them, but you cannot own them. What belongs to you is your judgment, your effort, your discipline, your values, and the honesty of your action. If you build your life on what does not belong to you, your peace will always be unstable. The practical shift is to move from approval to alignment. Instead of asking whether everyone will like your decision, notice whether the decision matches your values. Notice whether avoiding it would make you respect yourself less. Notice whether the fear of being judged is quietly asking you to betray something real. You do not need to become careless with people's opinions. Some feedback matters. Some people see what you miss. But no one else should become the owner of your direction. You can respect advice without becoming dependent on permission. You can love people without letting their fear become your limit. The mentally strong move forward because the action is right, not because everyone claps for it. Approval may come later. It may not come at all. But once you stop needing it before you move, you become much harder to control. And the next principle is where that freedom becomes even more practical. Mentally strong people protect the one thing the world is constantly trying to steal: their attention. Principle 7. They guard their attention like their life depends on it. Most people protect their money better than they protect their mind. They will be careful about what they spend, but careless about what they watch, read, replay, argue with, compare themselves to, and emotionally absorb every day. They give their attention to outrage, gossip, fear, noise, random opinions, and people who do not deserve that much space inside them. Then they wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, reactive, and weak. The mentally strong understand that attention is not small. Attention is the material your life is built from. What you keep looking at becomes what you keep thinking about. What you keep thinking about becomes what you emotionally rehearse. What you emotionally rehearse becomes the state you live from. And the state you live from shapes your decisions. This is why guarding attention is a Stoic discipline. The Stoics understood that the mind is constantly being pulled outward by impressions. Every insult asks for anger. Every pleasure asks for obedience. Every fear asks for belief. Every distraction asks for time. The untrained mind opens the door to all of it. The trained mind becomes more selective. That does not mean you ignore the world. It means you stop letting the world enter you without permission. A bad headline can steal your peace before the day has even begun. One comparison can poison your gratitude. One useless argument can occupy your imagination for hours. One person's drama can pull your attention away from the work that would actually strengthen your life. Most people do not notice this theft because it happens quietly. They call it scrolling, staying informed, checking, replying, relaxing, or just passing time. But over time, scattered attention becomes a scattered character. The mentally strong ask a stricter question: does this deserve my mind? That question is enough. Not every conversation deserves participation. Not every opinion deserves a reaction. Not every fear deserves a full investigation. Not every notification deserves immediate obedience. If you do not choose where your attention goes, someone else will choose for you. And usually they will choose in a way that benefits their agenda, not your peace. The practical move is to create friction around what weakens you. Do not make distraction effortless. Do not let your phone be the first voice of the morning. Do not give your best mental energy to people, platforms, or problems that only leave you more divided. Protect one clean hour. Protect one quiet morning. Protect one private space where your mind can return to itself. This is not about becoming strict for the sake of strictness. It is about understanding that your attention is your life in its most immediate form. Wherever it goes, a piece of you goes with it. The mentally strong guard their attention because they know the world does not need to defeat you directly. It only needs to keep you distracted long enough that you stop building yourself. Principle 8. They know when silence is stronger than explanation. Most people explain too much when they feel misunderstood. Someone questions their intention, and they rush to defend every detail. Someone attacks their character, and they start building a long case for their worth. Someone misreads their silence, their boundary, or their decision, and they feel forced to correct the story immediately. But the mentally strong understand something most people learn too late. Not every misunderstanding deserves your energy. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is self-command. There are moments when speaking is necessary. A clear boundary may need to be stated. A mistake may need to be owned. A difficult truth may need to be said with courage. The point is not to become silent out of fear or pride. The point is to stop speaking from panic. When the urge to explain comes from the fear of being judged, the explanation often becomes longer than the truth requires. This is where people lose power. They try to control every opinion. They try to correct every false version of themselves in another person's mind. They treat every accusation as a courtroom, every criticism as a trial, every disagreement as something that must be solved immediately. And while they are busy defending themselves, their peace is being spent on people who may not even want understanding. Some people ask for explanations because they want clarity. Others ask because they want access to your reaction. The Stoics valued discipline of speech because words are not small. Speech can reveal judgment, but it can also reveal dependence. If someone can make you explain for hours just by misunderstanding you on purpose, they have found a way to control your state. If someone can provoke you into saying more than you meant to say, they have pulled you away from command. The practical strength here is clean communication. Say what is true. Say what is necessary. Say it without begging to be understood. Then stop. A short sentence spoken from steadiness is often stronger than a long defense spoken from fear. Silence gives your words weight because it proves you are not speaking just to release emotion. It shows that you can hold pressure without turning every feeling into a public statement. It protects you from over-explaining your boundaries, your growth, your decisions, and your self-respect to people who benefit from keeping you uncertain. The mentally strong do not use silence to punish. They use it to preserve clarity. They know when to answer, when to wait, and when to let their life become the explanation. And once you learn that not every attack needs a defense, you stop giving every voice the power to pull words out of you. Principle 9. They review themselves before blaming the world. Most people blame the day before they examine how they moved through it. The traffic was bad. The people were difficult. The timing was wrong. The pressure was too much. The world gave them enough material to justify every reaction, and sometimes the day really was difficult. But if you only blame the world, you lose the lesson hidden in your own behavior. The mentally strong do something different. Before they make the world responsible for everything, they look inward with honesty. They notice where they lost patience, where they spoke from ego, where they wasted attention, where they avoided the hard task, where they let anger, fear, comfort, or approval guide the next move. This is not self-hatred. It is self-respect. A person who refuses to examine themselves remains owned by the same patterns. The Stoics practiced daily self-examination because they understood that character does not improve by accident. Seneca described reviewing the day, looking at what had been done well, what had been done poorly, and what needed correction. The point was not to punish the self at night. The point was to stop repeating the same blindness tomorrow. Most people repeat mistakes because they never slow down long enough to study them. They feel regret, then distract themselves. They feel guilt, then defend themselves. They feel discomfort, then blame someone else. Nothing changes because the pattern is never named clearly enough to be corrected. The mentally strong turn the day into training. If they reacted badly, they do not build an identity around it. They correct it. If they avoided responsibility, they notice the avoidance without decorating it with excuses. If they gave attention to noise, they learn where the mind is still easy to steal. Every day becomes feedback. One useful question is enough. Where did I lose command of myself today? That question can expose more than a